Welcome to another episode of Mike's Money Picks. Today on the podcast, we're going to be breaking down the 2024 Valero Texas Open. This is the last event before the 2024 Masters, and so this is the last opportunity for anybody to earn their way into the Masters field. It's also the last opportunity for everybody to get a tune-up to head into the tradition unlike any other. And so this always makes for a very compelling golf tournament. I particularly really like this course, TPC San Antonio. So here on this episode, we're going to give you a full breakdown of the course itself, TPC San Antonio, as well as what type of skill sets and stats are going to be key to success and correlated to success here. And then we're going to take a look at a custom model and see how I think this will play out in terms of the golfers who best fit this course. And then we're going to look at the board and identify all the golfers who make sense for DFS, betting, and one and dones this week, and hopefully give you guys some winners here at this tournament. Last week, we were, I wouldn't say all the way on Steven Yeager, but we had Steven Yeager ranked pretty highly. We were certainly all over Tony Finau. So, definitely a good week for us at Memorial Park, and we're hoping to run it back here this week at TPC San Antonio. Also, next week, in case you haven't heard, is a big week. It's Masters Week, a tradition unlike any other. So we're likely to have like a ton of content coming your way to Masters Week. The plan is to do at least 2 shows next week. So make sure if you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. That we can be notified when those episodes drop, one of which is likely to be a live show. So if you're subscribed, you'll be notified when we go live, and you'll have a chance to hop in the live chat and talk some golf with us. And then also, if you're listening on audio, I promise you'll get those shows as well. Even the lives you'll be able to listen to on audio. I will clip the audio from it. Everything will be okay. But if you're subscribed to the audio feed, you'll know exactly when those drop. So that way you can listen to them as soon as possible. Because like I said, the Masters is like one of my favorite sporting events. Like literally, it goes March Madness, NFL playoffs, the Masters, in my opinion. So definitely looking forward to breaking that down next week. But before we can get to next week, we got to talk about this week. So let's go ahead and dive into the course itself, TPC San Antonio. All right, so as I said in the intro, I actually particularly like this course, TPC San Antonio. I think that there are a lot of strategic elements to it, and it's not just laid out in a way that make it very similar to the other more cookie-cutter TPC courses or, just more of the courses that we see on the PGA Tour. There's a lot of elements that kind of make this one a little bit differently. So TPC San Antonio is a par 72, is a little over 7,400 yards, so it is one of the longer courses on the PGA Tour. It is a Greg Norman design with recent consultation from Sergio Garcia, which kind of should have been a dead giveaway that Sergio was headed to live once, Greg Norman was attached to it. Anyway, the only other Greg Norman design that is still played on the PGA Tour is Vedanta Vallarta, as well as this course, TPC San Antonio. Now, on the scorecard, TPC San Antonio has basically a different way of getting to that long distance than you would expect. They have long par 3s. The par 4s are either really short, under 400 yards, or long, over 460 yards. There's not really that much in between. And then the par 5s are really long, some of which will not be reachable for everyone on the field. This is actually one of the more difficult sets of par 5s that are on the PGA Tour, but still, with it being a par 72 and with a lot of the par 3s and par 4s being pretty difficult, the par 5s are where you're going to want to be doing a lot of your scoring this week, and they're not that easy to score on. So what you end up with is with those yardages, you end up with a lot of approach shots that are under 100 yards and over 200 yards. There's not a whole lot of middle irons here at this course. It's a lot of either wedges and long irons, and really the par 5s, whether you're going for the green or not, you're either going to end up with a really long approach shot from 200 plus, or your third shot is going to be really in tight with a wedge. So again, the par 5s kind of further exemplify this stratification of approach shots with there not being a whole lot of mid-iron play. Now, aside from that discrepancy, there's a lot of similarities to TPC San Antonio from what we saw last week at Memorial Park, and I think the difficulty is kind of similar as well. These are 2 of the more difficult tracks on the PGA Tour. The fairways are not like the narrowest on PGA Tour, but I would not call them wide either. But the penalty for missing the fairway small is not that high. The rough is really short, that on some holes, the short is so rough that it actually yields a higher birdie or better percentage than the fairway, which is kind of crazy when you think about it. But, missing in the rough isn't a penalty, but the big miss is a penalty. Whereas, Memorial Park, it was really tree lined, and the big miss could get you caught in trees. This course, you could end up in a natural area like a desert or a farmland type of area in there with the oak trees, and it's just not where you want to be. Kevin Na once made like a 16 on one of the holes once he got caught in there. So to me, it's kind of similar to TPC Scottsdale in that regard, where TPC Scottsdale has those natural desert areas where you do not want to end up at. Now, the course generally does play pretty difficult with all these conditions that we've talked about. The green regulation percentage is the third lowest on the PGA Tour. So anytime greens regulation is low, scoring is going to be pretty low because that's how you generate birdie looks. And so basically, the way that you can really lead yourself to success here this week is by hitting more greens. Shocker, right? So generally, you do see really good approach players play well here, or guys who can be really good approach players play well here. And really, if you're not able to hit the greens, you're going to have a short game to keep up as well. You cannot let these opportunities turn into bogeys. Now, where this differs from Memorial Park is the fact that if you miss the green, you're likely going to be in a bunker this week. This course is much more heavily bunkered than Memorial Park. There is much less of the short grass chipping areas than Memorial Park had. So I would consider sand saves this week when looking at around the green play as opposed to any other component of around the green play. And also, like last week, the greens are going to be the same surface that we've seen for pretty much the last month on the PGA Tour. This Bermuda grass overseeded with POA because the Bermuda has not yet grown in, and that is actually typically the case here at TPC San Antonio. So you can look at putting numbers from the last 3 weeks in a row now, from Memorial Park to TPC Sawgrass to the Valspar Championship. You can look at those 3 courses for putting because it's that same Bermuda with the POA overseed. Now, like I said, pretty much what you see here, and also if you're watching on YouTube, Pro Visualizer has a great little flyover of the course that we've been watching. Shout out to them. A great video. It definitely gives you a sense of the lay of the land here at TPC San Antonio. Now, when you look at the historical data here, what you typically see is a lot of guys that win here are guys who can be good approach players. You don't necessarily have to be long, even though Charlie Hoffman back in the day and Jimmy Walker back in the day were long, but you do have to have the ability to be an elite iron player. Corey Connors is one of the better iron players on tour, can be good with his wedges, can be good with his long approach shots, and is very rarely good with the putter, but when he wins, he is good with the putter. Jordan Spieth is a guy who can get really hot on approach and around the green. We don't think of Jordan Spieth as being this exceptional off the tee player, though. So really the path to success here is through approach play and being able to get up and down on these greens. When you look at the leaderboard last year, the entire top 4 gained over 1.8 strokes per round on approach. So the formula for being at the very top of the leaderboard here was being great on approach. It really did not matter what you did off the tee. The entire top 4 failed to gain over 1 stroke per round off the tee. So if you're able to really stick it in close on approach, or just really put yourself in better spots on approach than other people are, that is how you can succeed here this week. And being around the green on putting can help you as well. But I really think this is an approach premium week more so than anything else. And when you look at guys who historically play well here in the past, again, it kind of goes to this same theory of guys who are pretty good approach players, right? Sam Stevens actually has the best strokes gained number here at this course, but that's really just because he played here last year and finished second. So, a little bit of a help there when that's your only sample size. Corey Connors has played here 5 times, though, and never finished worse than 35th, and he does have 2 wins. This is actually the only course that Corey Connors has ever won at. Rory McIlroy has only teed it up here twice, missed the cut most recently in 2022, but he also has good history here, along with Charlie Hoffman, Jordan Spieth, Brandt Snedeker, Grayson Murray, S.H. Kim, Alex Noren, and Matt Kuchar, rounding out the rest of your top 10 in terms of course history, guys. Now, in terms of key stats here at this course, I think the strokes gained off the tee will be slightly important, but not as important as other weeks. Off the tee, the stat that I would prioritize is distance from edge of fairway. What this actually does is this measures how far the miss is when you miss the fairway. So, like, for example, last week at Houston, Scottie Scheffler did not rank elite in any of the driving accuracy metrics, but he was elite in distance from edge of fairway because when he missed, he didn't miss it really, really wide. He missed it just barely, which left himself in the rough, which was, fairly benign to miss. He didn't find himself in any super trouble off the tee because he had a very low distance of edge of fairway, right? I also think strokes gained approach is going to be very important. It's important every week, but even more so this week. If you're looking at proximity buckets, going less than 100 yards and over 200 yards is also going to be what you're going to want to do this week because that's where the approaches are going to come from. Strokes gained around the green and sand saves are going to be important as well because that is going to be where you end up, having a lot of strokes that you can really easily gain or lose. And then in terms of the comp courses, Memorial Park, Vedanta Vallarta, TPC Twin Cities, TPC Scottsdale, and then I think Oak Hill is going to be a sneaky comp course. Oak Hill was where the PGA Championship was played at last year, and that course does feature some very stratified approach shots, either very short or very long. It also does not feature a whole lot of big-time hazards off the tee, so that would be another reason why I would think Oak Hill would be a decent comp course for TPC San Antonio. All right, so now that we've fully broken down the course, let's go ahead and dive down the rabbit hole. All right, so you've been with us for a few weeks now. You know that when I say go down the rabbit hole, I am talking about BetSperts Golf. They have a tool called the Rabbit Hole that is absolutely great for figuring out who you want to pick, in DFS betting and one and done and the like, because what this rabbit hole does is it allows you to really filter in different conditions and stats and just narrow in on the exact type of golfer and the exact type of skill sets that you want. So for this week, the rabbit hole stats that I picked. Well, always, I think the recent strokes gained total is something that you have to look at. And the best in the field in that category in the last 20 rounds have been Ludwig Aubert, Maverick McNeely, Hideki Matsuyama, Andrew Novak, and Doug Ghim. Now, I also want recent approach play to be a priority. So the best players on approach in the last 20 rounds have been Keith Mitchell, Ryan Moore, Corey Connors, Chandler Phillips, and Austin Eckroat. Now, we also mentioned in the course preview how sand saves are going to be very important this week. And the best in the field in sand saves in the last 30 rounds have been Luke Donald, Raul Pareda, Russell Henley, Nico Echeverria, and Carl Yuan. So really, a lot of guys without big sample sizes there. So just take that one with a little bit of grain of salt. Distance from edge of fairway is another stat that we quoted in the course breakdown, and the guys who are the best in the field at that are Russell Henley, Colin Morikawa, Matt Fitzpatrick, Tom Kim, and Lucas Glover. For strokes gained off the tee, in courses with short rough, which is what they will see this week, the top 5 are Rory McIlroy, Ludwig Aubert, Jimmy Stanger, Vincent Norman, and Adam Svensson. For strokes gained approach in short rough, we've got Eric Van Rooyen, Christian Bezuidenhout, Austin Eckroat, Chandler Phillips, and Eric Cole. And then we went with 2 rough and 2 fairway proximities, the short and the long for both of them. For short rough proximity, we've got Harris English, Jordan Spieth, Mark Hubbard, Thorbjorn Olesen, and Adrian Dumont de Chassar. And then for the long approaches from the rough, we have got David Skins, Zach Johnson, Billy Horschel, Luke Donald, and Rico Hoey. The short fairway approach, we have got a top 5 of, if it'll load, there we go. A top 5 of Bud Cauley, Harrison Endicott, Andrew Landry, Rory McIlroy, and Davis Riley. For the long fairway approaches, we have got Thorbjorn Olesen, Patrick Fishburne, Corey Connors, Paul Barjon, and Keith Mitchell. Now, also, I wanted to look at around the green play in difficult scoring conditions, and that group would be Aaron Baddeley, Roger Sloan, Ben Griffin, Andrew Putnam, and Davis Thompson. Birdie or better on par 5s in tough scoring conditions, which is what we expect to see this week. Alex Noren, Jimmy Stanger, Matt Fitzpatrick, Bo Hostler, and Padraig Harrington. Keep in mind, a lot of Padraig Harringtons are going to be from the Senior Tour. We also looked at strokes gained putting on the comp grass, this Bermuda overseeded with POA that we have seen recently. And the top 5 in that category on putting on this grass have been Sam Ryder, Taylor Montgomery, Matt Kuchar, Aaron Baddeley, and Ben Griffin. And then just in terms of strokes gained total for the comp courses, that is everything that we listed off in the beginning. Strokes gained total for the comp courses. The top 5 in that category are going to be Billy Horschel, Keith Mitchell, Eric Cole, Alex Noren, and Patrick Rogers. Now, when you throw all that together in a model and give it some different weights, my top 5 for the model ended up being Corey Connors, Hideki Matsuyama, Aaron Rai, Alex Noren, and Jordan Spieth, with Andrew Novak, Keith Mitchell, Doug Ghim, Lucas Glover, and Max Homa rounding out the top 10, and Russell Henley popping at 11. He actually popped at a few of the metrics that we talked about. Now, what's interesting, if you'll notice, Rory McIlroy and Ludwig Aubert did not pop up in either of those two. And really, it's because we looked at recent approach play. Those two guys are not going to pop up well at recent approach play. And in fact, Ludwig does not pop up well when you look at a lot of the stats, such as sand saves and distance from edge of fairway. But for those two guys, it's partially because they've only been playing elevated events, so they've only been playing in elite fields at courses that are not necessarily all that similar to this one. So I can understand why those two guys did not pop up well, as well as Colin Morikawa not popping up well and Tommy Fleetwood not popping up well. In fact, McIlroy ranked 21st, Aubert 42nd, Morikawa 43rd, and Tommy Fleetwood 92nd. So those guys did not rank out well in the model, but knowing what we put in, I understand why they did not rank all that well. So that's just important to know going in. If you are doing a custom model, look at what you're putting in and look at the events that the guys have played and maybe why or why not they have actually ended up popping or not popping in your model. All right, so that does it for the rabbit hole stats. Now let's take a look at the board and see if we can identify some winners this week. All right, so at the top of the board this week sits none other than Rory McIlroy, which should really come as no surprise when you don't have Scotty Scheffler or John Rahm or anybody like that in the event. And Rory is in it. Rory's going to end up being the top price golfer on DraftKings. He's going to end up being the odds leader in the betting market. So I got to say, though, it's kind of an odd spot for Rory because his last 4 events have just kind of been ho-hum. Like, he hasn't finished any better than 19th. He hasn't finished any worse than 24th. And 3 of those have been elevated events. And he just really hasn't seemed like he's all on it yet. But, at the same time, this is the final tune-up before the Masters. And Rory McIlroy actually has a history at winning his final event before majors. In 2021, he won at Quail Hollow before the PGA Championship. In 2022, he won at the Canadian Open right before the U.S. Open. And then in 2023, he won the Scottish Open right before the Open Championship. So Rory McIlroy could ironically complete the pre-major career Grand Slam if he wins here at the Valero Texas Open. So I definitely do think that Rory, with his lack of recent form, definitely wants to have a good showing this week, definitely wants to play well and put something good on the board before heading to the Masters, because I'm pretty sure he would openly admit he wants this Masters more than any other tournament in the calendar year, so that way he can have the career Grand Slam and put all the doubters to bed. So I definitely do think that Rory's going to want to have a good showing this week, but the iron play hasn't been great. The off-the-tee game is always going to be great, and it's just a matter of if his long irons and wedges can show up, if Rory can actually come through and win this tournament. I think that betting number on him is a little bit thin, but I do think he makes for a very solid play in DraftKings. In terms of a salary perspective, DraftKings did go with the 12K range at the top, with Rory being 12,300 and the 5K minimum. So there's plenty of value to put Rory in at salary. Last week we were playing Scotty Scheffler at 13,000. He was worth every single penny. So, I do think that there's plenty of argument to be made for playing Rory in DFS, but I don't really like the betting number on him. Hideki Matsuyama is a guy who I do think has the upside to win this event, though. His history at this event has been a little bit of a mixed bag, but with what he does in his game, I think it fits the course really, really well, and his recent form is also really, really good. He's coming off of a win at Riviera, T12 at the Arnold Palmer Invitational, and T6 at the Players' Championship, where he had the best ball striking tournament of his career. So Hideki is coming in great form, and I really like what his skill set brings to this course, so Hideki is going to be one of my favorite plays this week, but I think my favorite and my pick to win this week is going to be Ludwig Aubert. So when you look at the guys who have won here, Corey Connors, Jordan Spieth, and the like, they're guys that have these elite iron and wedge games, right? And have elite short games. And they're not necessarily all that long off the tee. They're not necessarily all that accurate off the tee. Well, what if I told you that we have a guy who has the ability to have that exact same approach play, but is long and accurate off the tee? In fact, a guy who is longer than Rory McIlroy and more accurate than Collin Morikawa off the tee this year. Well, that's Ludwig Aubert. He's great off the tee, and that is going to give him a supreme advantage to fire into these greens. His short game is not the best, but he's not going to need it to be the best if he is hitting more greens than everybody else, which, like I said, he has the potential to do because he is an elite wedge player, and he is also a pretty good long iron player. So I think this course sets up really well for him. And also, don't forget the fact that he played his college golf in the state of Texas at Texas Tech. So with it being a little bit of a familiar turf for him, I do really like this spot for Ludwig Aubert. Collin Morikawa and Max Homa, I'm a little cooler on, though. They're just not playing great. I don't think their games particularly shape up well for this course. Now, granted, I don't think they're going to be very highly owned in DraftKings, so this might be a situation where we talked about on the podcast before where a bad play becomes a good play. If nobody is playing Collin Morikawa and Max Homa, that would probably be the time you would want to play them. Matt Fitzpatrick may have just found something, in the Players' Championship. Apparently, there was something with his driver where he put in a weight and forgot to take it out, and he was playing pretty crappy, and then he took it out before the Players and came in 5th place. So if you believe in that storyline, then this would be a pretty good spot for him. He is long and accurate off the tee. He does have a great short game, and he is elite with his wedges. So I do think this is a pretty good spot for Matt Fitzpatrick, and especially if you believe that he's going to be better with the driver now that he's gotten that weight taken out. After Fitzpatrick lie the two kings of course history and two guys that I'm going to play a lot this week as well in Jordan Spieth and Corey Connors. There are guys who have won this event before. Spieth is coming in with actually not as bad recent form as it looks, because he's just barely been missing cuts. He hasn't been missing them by a lot, and it's been because of a few wayward shots that find the water. Well, guess what? There is no water here at TPC San Antonio. Well, I mean, there is water, but not a lot of water. So I do think this is a pretty good spot for him. And then Corey Connors, he's won here twice. He's coming in on good form, checks a lot of boxes. Both Spieth and Connors are going to be in a lot of my lineups this week. Now, the other guy at the top of the board that I do like is I like Alex Noren. He's got good history at this event, and he's also coming in off 3 straight top 20 finishes. He is a guy who has an elite level short game. And so to me, I like Alex Noren when the conditions get harder. And so if you expect it to be pretty difficult this week, which I think is a definite possibility, Alex Noren is going to be a guy that you are going to want to get into your lineup. All right, so let's go ahead and take a quick breather, and then let's talk about some value plays. Now, to me, looking at the board, the 8K range has a lot of guys that I'm going to be passing on in DraftKings in favor of the top half of the 7K range. Christian Bezuidenhout has just been a great approach player recently, coming off of a T13 and a T9, and this is the type of course that you're going to want to get him at. I tend to prefer Bezuidenhout when it gets more difficult. Same deal with Aaron Rai, who has an elite level short game and is coming off of a T7 at the Houston Open. I'm a big fan of both those guys. Now, the kind of the inverse of those two is Akshay Bhatia and Eric Cole. These are two guys who don't have great short games, but they tend to be at their best off the tee when you can spray it a little bit, and this is a course where you can be a little bit wayward off the tee and not get punished as long as you don't have a big miss. This is also a course where long iron play is going to be at a premium. Both of these guys are elite with their long irons. So I do think that Akshay Bhatia and Eric Cole are guys that I'm going to be interested in this week. I'm not as concerned about the short game deficiencies for these two guys, because when you have a guy like one of these two, they're going to need to their path to victory is them hitting the green more than everybody else. And so if you're hitting the green more than everybody else, you're going to need your short game less than everybody else. And so I do like Bhatia and Cole for that reason. I also like Keith Mitchell and Beau Hossler. We talked about Keith Mitchell time and time again, where he pops up at courses that Rory McIlroy plays well at for whatever reason. So if you're a fan of McIlroy this week, then you can be a fan of Keith Mitchell as well. And then Beau Hossler, you've got a guy who played his college golf at Texas, who has just been on point as a ball striker recently and just hasn't really found it with the putter, and maybe he can find it this week. Maverick McNeely has returned from injury and appears to be all the way back. Dating back to the Waste Management Phoenix Open, this is now 5 straight starts where he has been a positive player in terms of strokes gained and finished no worse than 45th. He is one of the best putters on the planet, and if he gets hot with the putter, look out, Maverick McNeely could find his way back into the winner's circle. Austin Eckroat is another guy that I like quite a bit this week. He is another guy who is pretty good at these long approach shots, pretty good at these courses with short rough where he can be a little bit wayward off the tee and still play well. And so I really do like the talent on Eckroat. He's used to playing in these firm and fast Texas type conditions because he did play his college golf at Oklahoma State, which is not too far down the road. So I do think that Eckroat is a really, really solid fit for the course here this week. Doug Ghim is sitting at 6,900, and I'm hoping that everybody is going to be off of him after he was pretty much just printing everybody money a few months ago. But his last 2 events have been T67 and a missed cut, but the approach play has still been there. The accuracy off the tee has still been there. So I do think that this is going to be a really good spot for Doug Ghim. He's also a guy who played his college golf at Texas, so he is certainly used to this climate, certainly used to this environment, as Austin, Texas is not all that far from San Antonio. So I'm definitely a big fan of Doug Ghim this week, and I'm ready to hop back on the Ghim wagon. Now, the other guys in the 6K range that I do like on DraftKings, I like Lee Hodges a lot. We've talked about time and time again, he's a guy that we like at long and difficult golf courses, and that's kind of bore itself out this year. T24 at the Genesis Invitational, T12 at Bay Hill, T26 at Valspar. So I just think he's a really good course fit. He has a win at one of my comp courses, TPC Twin Cities, so Lee Hodges is certainly going to make my DFS player pool this week, as is Andrew Novak. So, Andrew Novak's kind of a very similar boat to Doug Ghim, where he was really solid on approach and he was making people a lot of money, and then all of a sudden he wasn't. But I think he's kind of found it back with his made cut at the Houston Open. I'm willing to jump back on the Andrew Novak train and get back on him. The remainder of the 6K range, you've got two former champs here, Charlie Hoffman and JJ Spawn. Got to always have interest in a former champ when they're coming back to a site that they won at. But in the lower 6K range, I really like Nate Lashley. I think he actually makes for a really solid bet to win this tournament. He is a guy who seems to always pop up in courses where long approach shots are required, and he's coming in on really good recent form, T13 at the Players, T21 at the Houston Open. Nate Lashley is definitely going to be a guy who makes my DFS player pool this week. as is Joseph Bramlett. Joseph Bramlett is a guy that anytime where players are going to be hitting a lot out of the rough, whether it's short, long, or whatever, Joseph Bramlett is one of the better hitters from the rough on the PGA Tour. So a guy who may lose it a little bit off the tee, but I'm not so concerned about him losing it off the tee because he rates out really well when he is hitting from that rough. So Joseph Bramlett is one of my favorite plays in the lower 6K range this week, as is Jimmy Stanger, who has a very similar statistical profile to Joseph Bramlett. Now, also, Chad Ramey is a sneaker or a sleeper pick that I got to talk about. He's $5,800 on DraftKings, and he is kind of a long approach specialist. And so at this course where there's going to be a lot of long approaches, I do like him in that regard. You know, he was T17 at the Houston Open. He was really in contention through 2 rounds, and he kind of faded a little bit over the weekend. But I do like him for that regard. His one win at Corrales Punta Cana is one of the courses on the PGA Tour that has some of the longest approaches. It can also be really swept by the wind, which can be a factor here at this tournament also. So I do think that Chad Ramey has those 2 things going for him. And if you're willing to go down to $5,800 to play Chad Ramey, that opens up a lot in your DFS lineup. And then another guy, $5,800, who I like is Ryan Palmer. He seems to always play well in the state of Texas. He faded over the weekend at the Houston Open, but he did make the cut. And at $5,800 on DraftKings, you know, it might not win you a GPP, but if you get a guy at $5,800 who's just going to make the cut, that can really shape up things for the rest of your lineup, especially if you're able to get a 6 for 6 for your lineup. And I got to be honest, y'all, that's kind of the end of the guys that I feel really good about. At the bottom of the 5K range, there are some guys that, like, if you want to bet on talent, I think you can. Vincent Norman is a really talented driver of the golf ball whose recent form coming in is just quite horrible, but he is a very talented guy who I think will eventually get it right. Same goes with the Cootie brothers. You know, Pearson kind of swapped in for his brother Parker last week. Parker had been the one who had been making all the cuts, and then last week it's Parker who misses the cut and Pearson who makes the cut. I wouldn't be opposed to playing either of the 2 of them. They are Texas Longhorns, so they are quite familiar with the area, and I wouldn't mind going to them. I think there's worse plays than the 2 of them. And then Kevin Doherty is just an elite driver of the golf ball, coming in off back-to-back T45 finishes. I think you could certainly do worse than him as well. But like I said, this 5K range, you're really taking some risks, and I really do think you're going to want to just bet on guys who are talented once you get to a certain point down here. All right, so that does it for the value section. Let's go ahead and take a look at one and done for the week. So last week was not a terrible week for me in one and done. I did end up picking 3 different guys in my 3 entries, all 3 of whom made the cut, all 3 of whom had decent finishes. I was not on the winner, Stephen Yeager, but I did have Tony Finau in 1, Syed Thagala in 1, and Alex Noren in 1. So 3 not bad selections, and all guys that I'm probably not going to be super eager to use again somewhere down the line. So with this event being the last one before the major, I don't necessarily want to go all in on one of these guys near the very top of the board, especially considering that there's plenty of elevated events left in the schedule that are going to have a bigger purse than this one. And this one is not the smallest purse ever, but it's not the largest either. So definitely going to be saving the likes of Rory McIlroy, Ludwig Aubert, Max Homa, Matt Fitzpatrick. I definitely think you want to save the guys like that. Now, where I would start considering to use guys, I'm pretty big on Hideki this week, and I think that, you know, in terms of spots to use Hideki, this is a pretty good one, right? Like, he's coming in on elite level recent form. Is he a guy who you want to play at an elevated event or a major? Maybe, but like, he would probably need to keep this recent form up for you to feel confident picking him in an event like that. And so why not just go ahead and pick him now while you know his recent form's really good, right? So I think Hideki makes a lot of sense as a one and done pick this week. I also really like Jordan Spieth this week as a one and done pick. There are 2 more Texas events, the Byron Nelson and the, what's that other one called? I can't think of, the Charles Schwab Challenge at Colonial. Those are the other 2 Texas events coming up that you might want to save Jordan Spieth for. He's also a ringer at Augusta. So to me, if you're not going to use Spieth at one of those Texas events or at Augusta, what are you saving him for? So I think he's a really, really logical pick to take here at this event, and I would not mind going with Jordan Spieth. Ludwig Aubert, like we say, I think he's the guy that I think is going to win this golf tournament, but I don't really know if I want to use him this week. If I'm being honest, I think that there's going to be a week over the summer in between some of the majors where it's just a jabroni field and Ludwig Aubert is clearly the most talented golfer in the field. And I would almost rather get him when he's clearly the most talented golfer in the field than a situation like right now where, you know, he's probably after Rory, Hideki, and Homa and Morikawa in terms of overall talent. So definitely consider considering Ludwig, but I don't think you have to go Ludwig here this week, even though, like I said, he is my pick to actually win this golf tournament. And I kind of have similar thoughts on Ludwig that I have with Eric Cole. Like, Eric Cole plays in every event. Same with Akshay Bhatia. So with those two guys playing in nearly every event, like, you don't need to rush to play either of them, even though I do think this is a particularly good course fit for all those guys. Corey Connors would be the obvious one and done pick this week. I think he will be very popular. I think he makes a lot of sense to pick this week, with him being the defending champ, with him having 2 wins at this course, and there not really being a super obvious spot on the schedule to use him at. Maybe you might want to use him in Canada because, like, he is Canadian, but I don't think that there's a super obvious spot other than that down the road for Corey Connors. If you wanted to go a little bit outside the box, I think Austin Eckroat and Christian Bezuidenhout make for very interesting selections as well. Now, I'm going to start playing my position just a little bit. In this one and done that I've been picking here on the show, I'm ranked 78th out of about 150 players, so I'm sitting in the very middle of the pack, but quite far from the money. I need to start making up some ground, so I really need to try to find a winner this week. But I also don't want to get near the end of the season where I've got a lot of guys left over that I didn't use that are talented golfers, right? So I think I'm going to go ahead and go with Ludwig Aubert this week here in that one and done. Just because I want to start getting aggressive. I want to start picking a guy that I think can win the golf tournament. However, if it looks like, as I get closer to the week, that it looks like Ludwig is going to be pretty popular, it looks like he's going to be highly owned, I think I would pivot to Eckroat or Bezuidenhout as some lower owned, more sleeper type options. In fact, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and officially switch it. I'm going to make Austin Eckroat my one and done selection here this week. So the one that I've been doing here on the podcast, Austin Eckroat, is my official one and done play for the week. All right, so that does it for our Valero Texas Open 2024 preview. If you like what you heard here on the podcast and like what you saw on YouTube, please hit the like button on YouTube. Helps me out a ton. I really do appreciate it. And if you're listening on audio, please rate and review. I cannot tell you guys how much that helps me out, and I really do appreciate it when you guys do that. Helps the podcast show up in searches, and just helps it be more easily findable, showing up on people's homepage. And so that's invaluable, y'all. So reminder, if you do want more from me, follow me on Twitter at Mike's Money Picks. I'm more than happy to answer any lineup questions that you might have on Twitter. And also, I do offer an article every single week for every PGA Tour tournament where I profile my DFS core plays. That article is available on Patreon. It also has my final model top 10 as I tinker with these models all week long. So if you do want to know who my model ends up liking by the end of the week, as well as who makes my core in DFS, head on over to the Patreon, patreon.com/Mike's Money Picks to get access to that. All right, so that does it for this episode, y'all. We've successfully broken down the Valero Texas Open. As we mentioned, next week is a big week, Masters Week, a tradition unlike any other. Augusta National, Butler Cabin, Jim Nance, the green jacket. I just love it so much. So we're going to have a lot of content coming your way for Masters Week, so make sure you are subscribed on audio and on YouTube, so that way you can be there for all that great content when it drops. All right, y'all, that does it for this episode. So hopefully gave you guys some winners this week. Hopefully gave you guys plenty of information that you need to pick some winners this week. Thank you guys for listening. Best of luck to you at the Valero Texas Open, whether you were playing DFS, betting, or one and done. Hopefully we got you covered. Thank you guys for listening, and I will see you guys next time.